Welcome to Sola Church Online.
I'm Alan Rigg. This is my wife, Miranda Landers, and together we lead Sola Church, a hybrid church, digital plus micro.
And if you're wondering what is digital church, well, you are here right now with us having digital church. We put a new service up every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on our Church Online platform.
And then micro church, that's our small groups called life groups that meet during the week. We've got in-person groups and we've got online groups. We'll tell you more about that at the end of the service.
And I think you're going to enjoy the service today. Let's worship.
Spoke a word, you were singing over me, and you have been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me, and you have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't turn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. And you have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't turn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. All the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. Your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. Your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You are. Great are you, Lord.
This is that time in our service when we worship with our giving. If you're just checking us out today, please don't feel like you have to participate. But if Sola Church is your church home, or these online services have just been a blessing to you, it's super easy to make a one-time tax-deductible donation or even to schedule a recurring gift.
The easiest way is to scan the QR code on your screen. But you can always go to solachurch.life and click the tab at the top that says Give.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much for your generosity. Your giving makes it possible for us to create this digital content, to do our micro church gatherings, to do outreach. So thank you guys.
Let's get into our time of teaching.
Let's go ahead and open our Bible to Mark chapter 14. That's where we're going to be today, picking up right where we left off last time. Now, this coming weekend is a holiday weekend, right? Saturday, July 4th, Independence Day, and it's kind of a big deal. I mean, it's always a big deal, but especially when we're celebrating 250 years as a country. I can remember being a kid, celebrating the bicentennial. Here we are, already halfway to another centennial, 250 years. And you know, I love our country. I know you do too. I just think that, you know, being 250, like on Saturday when you watch fireworks, whether that's in person or whether that's on TV, like we're going to have all the feels on this 250th anniversary for our country. But you know, to be honest, I always have all the feels on the 4th of July, and not only because I love our country, but because 47 years ago, 1979, I was 14 years old, I was on summer vacation, and I had an experience with Jesus that forever changed my life. It was that summer that I heard and accepted the call to be a pastor. 14 years old. At the end of summer vacation, when I got back to school, within a short time, I'd led several friends to faith and started a Bible study, and I've been teaching the Bible ever since. I mean, just really an amazing, impactful turn that my life took in that summer. And because that pivot didn't happen in a day, it didn't happen at a specific moment in time, but over the course of that summer, I just picked July 4th to commemorate that and to celebrate that. So again, no offense to our great country, but as far as I'm concerned, those fireworks are for me and for what Jesus what Jesus did for me. Think of your pastor when your orchestra is playing, and but yeah, all the feels, like emotions. I remember reading one time somebody said that emotions were intended by God to be a catalyst for action. I mean, it's like we know how gratitude feels, but what does gratitude do? That's what we're going to talk about today. So you probably already turned there, but just in case, again, we're in Mark chapter 14, or should I say the Gospel according to San Marcos. St. Mark, our city is named for the author of this Bible book. How cool is that? And we called this series Marked because, well, not only is it a play on words, but Jesus has marked us. And he's working in us and through us to leave his mark on this community. So in this series, man, we're becoming unstoppable, unerasable, marked. We're going to call this one Marked by Gratitude. And the first thing we're going to see about gratitude is that gratitude serves. Look with me, Mark 14, beginning in verse 1. It says, after 2 days, it was the Passover. That's one of 3 major feasts, annual feasts on the Jewish calendar. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread, a 7-day feast that followed Passover. And the chief priests, plural, there's only one chief priest, Caiaphas, but here it includes his predecessor, Annas. The chief priests and the scribes, these were scholars and authorities on the Mosaic law. They sought how they might take him, that is Jesus, by trickery and put him to death. But they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar of the people. So just to kind of put this on a calendar, we've been doing that since we came to this final week of Jesus' life. This is still Tuesday of Holy Week, at least by our reckoning. Because it's happening in the evening, it's technically Wednesday by Jewish reckoning. You know, the Jewish day goes from sundown to sundown. So our Tuesday evening is the start of their Wednesday. But just for you and I to kind of know where to place it. And so it says at the beginning of verse 3, I'm not going to read the whole verse. It says, and being in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came having an alabaster flask of very costly oil of spikenard. Now, back in chapter 11, which we were in several weeks ago, we learned a little bit about this place called Bethany. It was on the opposite side of the Mount of Olives from Jerusalem. In fact, if you were traveling to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover and you were coming from that direction, if you were traveling westward from the east, you would have ascended the Mount of Olives, passing through, among other villages, Bethany, and then up over the top, down into the Kidron Valley, and up into Jerusalem. So we talked about Bethany as being a place where Jesus had many friends, and it was the place where he stayed the final week of his life. Yes, during the day he was in Jerusalem, in and around the temple, but at night he would always retreat to the house of his friends there in Bethany. So he was making his way back and forth, every day this last week of his life. And so it's there in Bethany on what we think of as Tuesday evening that there's a party thrown in Jesus' honor. And it was hosted by a man named Simon. In fact, it calls him Simon the leper. Now, if he were still a leper, he wouldn't even have lived in Bethany, much less have been able to host a party. He would have had to move outside of the village. He would have had to live in a leper colony. So he was no longer a leper. And while the text doesn't say so, the inference is that Jesus had healed him. It's quite possible. I can't say for certain, but it's quite possible that Jesus had actually healed this man, Simon the leper. Simon was a common name, so the leper just distinguished this Simon from other Simons, but he really was no longer a leper, though he had been. And that means that if Jesus healed him, as I suspect, then not only had Jesus restored his health, but Jesus had restored his social life. He had gone from being an outcast, from being, in the out group to being in the in group. Like Jesus does that for people. I love that. I love that. Sometimes he heals broken bodies and he's always ready to heal a broken spirit. But you know what? One of the things he does is that he makes insiders out of outsiders. And for all of us, including me and including Miranda, who have ever found ourselves on the outside looking in, that's everything that Jesus does that. I love that about him. How grateful must this guy have been? Simon must have been so grateful, and that gratitude serves as a catalyst for this party. Anybody familiar with what we call the 5 love languages? It was a popular book, the 5 love languages. Very helpful, very insightful book. I recommend it. This reminds me a little bit of love language number 1, words of affirmation, because no doubt Simon had to explain what event he was inviting people to. Well, it's to honor Jesus. This is what Jesus did for me. He would have been talking up Jesus when inviting people, talking up Jesus when receiving people at the event itself, likely sharing openly what Jesus had done for him, words of affirmation. This story is told in more than one place, and in John's version, it tells us that the guest list included Jesus' friend Martha, her sister Mary, and their brother Lazarus. So Lazarus is another guy that, we need to talk a little bit about. Because in John's gospel, we find out that Lazarus had died, and several days later, Jesus had raised him from the dead. What an amazing thing that Jesus did for this man and for this family, and that people, got to see and got to witness. These siblings were so grateful to Jesus for raising Lazarus from the dead. They wanted to show gratitude. But how? Well, note, Martha, she served. That's what it tells us in John's version. In John 12, verse 2, it tells us that Martha served. So again, the 5 love languages, this is love language number 4, acts of service. Gratitude, what does gratitude do? Well, in this case, she served Jesus and the others. And listen, it was a lot of work. It wasn't like, she called Uber Eats to deliver the food. A formal meal in New Testament times like this would have included a starter of wine diluted with honey. There would have been 3 courses arranged on trays and beautifully decorated. There would have been actually a dessert of pastry and fruit. No doubt, Martha was up late the night before and up early that morning. She'd already put in a long day preparing to receive and entertain these guests. Since Simon is hosting it, how exactly she wound up in her role? Well, it's really fitting her character, as we're going to talk more about, because the first time we meet Martha in the scriptures, it's recorded in Luke chapter 10, and she was doing exactly the same thing. She was serving. She was doing all the work of serving the people around her. So it's who she was. It's what she did. But the interesting thing is that on that occasion, she wasn't happy about it. On that occasion, she was upset with her sister Mary for not helping her, and she complained. And Jesus challenged her to think differently, both about what she was doing and about what her sister was doing. So that's a whole nother Bible study, but I just want to make the point that when we come to Mark chapter 14 and we see Martha doing the same thing, she is not the same person. Last time Martha served because she had to. This time she serves because she wants to. Last time Martha was resentful as she thought about how little Mary was doing to help her. This time she was grateful as she thought about how much Jesus had done for her. And last time Martha chose work over worship, but this time she chose to make her work worship. And that's what grateful people do. Grateful people, there's a slide for it. Grateful people serve. When we're grateful to God, we serve at home. We want to be a blessing and not a burden to the people that live in our home, to our family or to our roommates. In the same way, when we are grateful to God, we want to serve in the community. We want to make the community that we live in a better place. We want to give back. Like for us as a church, not just wanting to be a church in the city of San Marcos in North County, but a church for the city of San Marcos and North County. And again, along these same lines, when we're grateful to God, we want to serve at church. So many of you are doing that, and I'm so grateful. I mean, the examples could take the rest of our time, but just to mention a few things that happen on a Sunday morning specifically, just to make this service happen. I mean, I'm so thankful for the setup and teardown team. They arrive hours before the rest of us and are here well after the rest of us have gone home or started eating lunch at our favorite restaurant. I'm so thankful for the greeters and ushers that welcome us at the front door and that help us find a seat as we make our way into the auditorium. I'm so grateful for the kids ministry teachers and helpers and those that check the kids in and keep them safe and everything that they do. I'm thankful, as I look at the back of the auditorium for the AVL team, audio, video, lights. There's people, on mixers and laptops and, making all the things that you see and hear happen. I'm so thankful for the band, for the worship team, for all of these musicians that you see on the stage, both the instrumentalists and the vocalists. These musicians bless us so much every single week with their hard work. So grateful for these volunteer teams at Mission 316 Church. And as I said, there's so many other things I could talk about. But when we think about people making this their church home, we think about taking 3 steps. We think about stepping in and attending on the weekend. We think about stepping out and participating in a small group during the week. And then we think about stepping up and joining a volunteer team. When we step in and attend, we're coming to know God. When we step out and visit a small group, we're finding freedom and discovering purpose. And when we step up and join a volunteer team, we're making a difference. Like it's this full-orbed experience as we follow Jesus together, marked by gratitude. What does gratitude do? Gratitude serves. Number 2, gratitude gives. Let's pick up where we left off in verse 3. In the first part of the verse, which you saw before, it had said that Jesus sat at the table and a woman, we said it was Mary, came with this alabaster flask of costly oil of spikenard. So then in the last part of the verse, which we're reading now for the first time, you see it on the screens, then she broke the flask and poured it, there's another Bible word, flax, and I keep saying the wrong word. Then she broke the flask and poured it on his head. So we're probably going to talk more about this next week because next week we get the Last Supper. And so it's relevant to that conversation too. But likely the way this room was set up is what was known as a triclinium. Here's what I'm talking about. In a triclinium, you have 3 tables that are set around a square. So picture a U shape because there's no 4th table. It's open on one end. And the couches are arranged on the outside. Guests reclined to eat. And they were given a pillow or a cushion to lean on. So normally they would have their weight resting on their left arm, and they would use their right arm to eat. Kind of different It's not the way I eat, but that's how they would have eaten most likely at this event. Their head toward the table, their feet away from the table. You see why that's an important detail. The feet are away from the table. Now, not only is that a blessing, I'm sure, but it facilitates what's going to happen here. So Mary, she was so grateful. She wanted to show her gratitude, but how? Well, if Martha served, Mary, she gave. Mary gave. The 5 love languages. This reminds me of a couple of those. Love language number 3 is gifts. Giving, receiving gifts is a love language. And love language number 5 is physical touch, which comes into play here as well. She kind of has both of those love languages in her action. The oil in verse 3 was like a liquid perfume. Spikenard was specifically a fragrant plant grown primarily in the Himalaya region of India. So it's interesting because Mark uses an adjective that's actually difficult to translate. Most scholars understand it to mean genuine or pure. In other words, this wasn't an imitation perfume. Many, many years ago as a young man, I worked in a warehouse, and I remember there were these 2 guys that would come by every now and again. They always had a great big box filled with knockoff perfumes and colognes. And they would ask if, we had a favorite cologne, or maybe if a girlfriend or wife had a favorite perfume, and they would offer to sell us their knockoff, which was way less expensive. And I never bought anything from them, but I remember them coming around, and these things were fake. They were phony. They weren't the real thing. They weren't the name brand. Well, this stuff right here in our Bible story didn't come out of these guys' box. Like, this was the real stuff. Some merchant had brought this alabaster flask from India. I mean, this wasn't something that Mary picked up at a little village market there in or near Bethany. This had traveled thousands of miles through international trade routes. It was genuine, it was rare, and it had extraordinary value. In verse 5, the value is estimated at 300 denarii. If you were a day laborer and if you worked 6 days a week, that's what you would earn in 1 year. Imagine having a bottle of perfume or a bottle of cologne that cost you 1 year's salary. That is some really, really valuable stuff. But listen, we've got a slide for it. Grateful people give. It's so true. Now listen, I'm not going to talk a lot about the typical aspect of giving that we all immediately think about. I'm going to talk about it for a moment, but then we're going to move right on. We did a message just a month ago called Marked by Generosity, where we talked a lot about giving in terms of financially giving, tithing, and so forth. So we don't need to revisit all of that. I'm going to make one simple observation about growing up. I remember growing up, going to church. My mom would always give me something to put in the offering basket. And, even in Sunday school, there was usually an opportunity for children to do that. So she would always put a few coins in my hand. I don't think it was ever bills, although the coins of that day were equivalent to bills of this day. Or you know what I'm trying to say. So I would have the buying power. So I would have a handful of coins. And when it was time for the kids who wanted to participate to throw their coins in the little basket or the little box, I would do that. And it was so cool. Like, I think that's a great idea. It's a great idea because it has absolutely nothing to do with the spare change that's rounded up. It has everything to do with teaching children from the beginning to express their gratitude to God by having an open hand, by giving back, by giving to Him and to others, sharing. It starts to instill that in them early. But the thing is that, when I think about it, I have only good memories about it. I was never tempted to keep the money. I never stuffed it back in my pocket. Imagine what my mom would have thought about that. She found out that I was filling my penny bank with what she was giving me to put in the offering. She probably wouldn't have been pleased. But so I think about how easy it was to give that because it cost me nothing. It cost me nothing to give that. She put it in my hand, I put it in the offering. But then I got to thinking at some point in my life, over the years, I got to thinking, how is it any different now? Back then, my mom was putting some spare change in my hand, and now God is putting money in my hand. How is it any different? It wasn't hard for me to give what my mom gave me because she gave it to me. And it shouldn't be hard for me to give some of what God gives me because he gave it to me. Like none of it is really mine. All of it is given to me. I'm so thankful to God for the way that he's blessed me and provided for my family over the years. But moving along, notice it says that she broke the flask. I said it right that time, flask, and poured it on his head. John adds that she anointed the feet of Jesus. Now, on the one hand, this is the customary greeting. The customary way that you would greet someone, a guest who came into an event like this, would be to wash their feet and to anoint their head with a small amount of oil. So what she does is the customary greeting plus, 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 plus. You know, as she washes his feet, dries them with her hair, anoints his head, as she does everything that she does. But you know, again, it's not surprising. Because just like with Martha, this is what Mary is always doing. Every time we see Mary, she's at Jesus' feet. In Luke 10, we see her waiting at Jesus' feet. In John 11, we see her weeping at Jesus' feet. And here in Mark 14, we see her worshiping at Jesus' feet. You know, when we talk about worship, our word worship means to attribute worth. To worship someone or something is to attribute supreme worth or to declare supreme value to that one or thing. So we worship because the object of our worship is worth it. We could think about the worship that we offer as worth it worship. When we come in on a Sunday morning, not that worship is nothing more than the songs we sing. It's so much more than that. But one of the ways we worship is with our songs. And when we think about that, when we are singing in church like we did today, it's a response to who God is and what he does. Worship, guys, is not something we look at or listen to. It's something we do. That's why we have to, make it our purpose to move away from passive worship toward active worship, to move from just being a spectator during worship to being a participant during worship. So I hinted at it already, but John also tells us that when she anointed the feet of Jesus, she wiped his feet with her hair. Now, that's striking. Even without any cultural understanding of New Testament times, that's striking, but it's even more so when we think about the time in which she did this. In first century Israel, women were never seen in public with their head uncovered, much less their hair down. So this was really, really unusual for a woman in a public setting to uncover her head and release her hair. This was unheard of. This just wasn't something that was done. And it's from this idea that we get our idiom to let one's hair down. Have you ever been in a situation and somebody said, "Oh, let your hair down"? It means like relax, like be yourself. You don't there doesn't have to be any pretense, like just be you, do you, like it's all good. This is safe space kind of a vibe. That's where that whole idiom comes from. So, her worship, and it was so unconventional. Now, what you consider conventional or unconventional at church could just depend on how you grew up. I've talked about it before, and I'm so grateful that growing up, I had the opportunity to worship in lots of different settings. I was raised Lutheran, so I had a real, traditional, liturgical kind of a vibe at home. But if I was with my grandparents, they were four square. We joke about swinging from the chandeliers. I was frightened as a kid in some of the service that I'm not saying that every Foursquare church is like that then or now. I've got a friend that pastors an amazing Foursquare church right here in San Marcos. Love that guy, love that church. But I'm just saying as a kid, like some of what was going on back then was just a little bit intimidating to me. I was kind of nervous to go to church with them. But I came to see that no matter where you are across a spectrum of worship expressions, that they're all beautiful, that they're all meaningful. And as a result, as an adult, that's really helped me because I can find myself in any kind of church and worship. Even if the way they do it isn't the way that I prefer to do it. I can be in that church and I can worship and I can experience the presence of God and I can express my gratitude by giving him worship and praise. So, for a lot of people, the bowing and the kneeling seems too formal, and the clapping and lifting one's hands like you saw this morning seems too emotional. I read one time about like the old Anglican wedding, like the verbiage around the old Anglican wedding. And there was one point where, the man, the woman, as part of the ceremony, they say to one another, "With my body I thee worship." That's beautiful. And that's one way that we could think about our relationship with God, is worshiping him with our body. In other words, heart worship and body worship are not mutually exclusive. Peter Gilchrist said, "We simply can't be spiritual without being physical. We are not one or the other, but both." And so we might think in terms of embodied worship, like Mary embodied worship. And when we're clapping or raising our hands or kneeling or standing and sitting and all the different things that we do and ways that we can approach, we are doing the same thing. It's embodied worship. We see lifting hands in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And if that's new to you and you see that, it's understandable that you'd be like, that's weird. Like even some of us who are comfortable doing it now, like during worship, we're antennas at full extension. But there might have been a time in our life when we were in a service where somebody did that and we're like, this is getting freaky. Like, I don't know. Are we supposed to do this? Should I run? But is it weird though? Is it? Is it really weird? How many of you guys are watching the World Cup? Anybody watching World Cup soccer? Yeah, you either don't care about it at all, or like you bleed the color of your team. People are, it's like all in or all out, but so many people are into it. We're talking about fans with elaborate face paint and their nation's colors. We're talking about people who are wearing oversized wigs or costumes. People starting coordinated chants that involve entire stadium sections. We're talking about people jumping up and down with both hands in the air after their team scores a goal. We're talking about people hugging complete strangers, high-fiving complete strangers, when their country scores. We're talking about people who traveled thousands of miles and spent thousands of dollars to watch one match. And don't get me wrong, I love sports. I'm really not making fun. I love sports. But if someone can fly halfway around the world, paint their face, sing for 90 minutes, and throw both hands in the air because a ball crossed a line, maybe lifting our hands because Jesus conquered sin and death isn't so weird after all. Just saying, just throwing that out there. So it postures faith. It says God will respond. It postures faith, I'm ready to receive. It indicates a lack of duplicity or deceit or guile. I won't go on at length about each of these postures, but in the Bible we also see kneeling and we also see standing and sitting. Obviously, we don't ever want to draw attention away from God to ourselves, but there's a place for embodied worship where we're honoring God not only with our hearts and our voices, but even with our bodies. And then I think about the words to the songs that we sing themselves, the words, the melodies. Have you ever misheard the lyric to a song? Most of us have done that at some point. Excuse me. And we've done it even with worship songs. We've done it even in church. When my eldest daughter, Lauren, was real young, there was a popular worship song at that time, Our God is an Awesome God. Our God is an awesome God, He reigns. Remember that? So God and then He, it came real fast. Awesome God, He reigns. So what she heard was, our God has an awesome body. That's what she thought. She thought the words were that God had an awesome bod, like He had this summer bod going. I don't know, that's what she heard. That's what she thought it said. Sometimes we sing world without end, amen, but somebody heard world with weird men, which is true, of course. That's pretty much the world we live in. Sometimes we sing, I exalt thee, O Lord, and someone heard, I'm exhausted, O Lord, to which everyone in the house said, amen. We're all burning the candle at both ends. Sometimes we sing this. Sometimes we sing, oh, the consecrated cross I bear. Somebody heard, oh, the constipated cross-eyed bear. We got to do our best to get the words right, but what matters more is the heart, right? It's the heart. Like sing like you're in the shower. Have you ever noticed that everybody sounds good in the shower? And nobody's really afraid to sing in the shower. You got to let loose like that at church, man. Sing like you're in the shower, but with your clothes on. Please. Thank you. It doesn't matter if we sound bad. It doesn't matter if we clap on 1 and 3. And yes, it doesn't matter if we get the words wrong now and again when we're bringing the right heart. So some of us, we're just too self-conscious to even think about kind of getting more active in worship. But that self-consciousness, though it's understandable, it's actually the opposite of worship. You know, it's interesting that in another place, Paul says that a woman's hair, her head, is her glory. And so there's something very humble about the way that Mary uncovers her head and lets her hair down. Humility is so often misunderstood because humility doesn't mean to think less of ourselves. It means to think of ourselves less. And so in worship, if we're just totally self-conscious, we're totally thinking about ourselves. And we want to move that, however understandable that may be, we want to move that to where instead of thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about God. Instead of being self-conscious, we become more God-conscious. In John's account, he says that when this event happened, the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil, the first aromatherapy. And I love this thought that Mary's hair would have still smelled like that perfume long after. Wherever she went, she would have taken that smell, that scent, that aroma with her. You know that worship clings to us? How we worship when we're together, it clings to us. And we take Jesus with us from the worship space to the living space to the work space and all the other spaces that we find ourselves in. Verses 4 and 5, we've got to move quickly. But there were some who were indignant among themselves and said, why was this fragrant oil wasted? For it might have been sold for more than 300 denarii. That's where we get the number. And give it to the poor. And they criticized her sharply. John tells us that it was Judas Iscariot, the one who would betray Jesus in just a few short days. These are the first recorded words of Judas. And John clarifies for us that Judas said this not because he cared about poor people, but because he kept the money box and he was a thief. The Greek word translated thief is where we get our English word kleptomaniac. So he had a problem. And so he was upset because this could have been a payday for him. And so, it is a good reminder for us, though, although he had a very particular motive, he was critical of Mary's worship style. And it's a good reminder for us not to be critical of the worship styles of other people. Other ways of doing it are not right or wrong, they're just different. So why this waste? Listen, nothing given to Jesus is ever wasted. When you give Jesus your time, it's not wasted. When you give Jesus your talent, it's not wasted. When you give Jesus your treasure, it's not wasted. Verse 6, Jesus said, let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, and whatever you wish, you may do them good, speaking of ongoing opportunities. But me, you do not have always, speaking of a one-time opportunity. She has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for burial. Wow. Wait a minute. Stop and sit with that for one hot sec. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for burial. Assuredly, I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. Jesus had been talking about his impending death, but the disciples weren't getting it. She got it. She got that this wasn't just a party, this was a going away party. I've always thought it was sort of interesting that among the women who came to the tomb after Jesus' death, this Mary was never among them. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, that's because she had anointed him for burial before his crucifixion. Yeah, true enough. But I can't help but wonder if just like she got what the others didn't get about his death, she got what others didn't get about his resurrection. Why go visit the tomb? He wasn't going to be there long. See what I'm saying? And how could she have come to a conclusion like that? How could she have that kind of insight? Well, could it be because every time we see Mary, she's at Jesus' feet? Could it be because that kind of worship, that kind of gratitude, that kind of thankfulness that expresses itself in giving, in worshiping, in praising, in extravagantly loving on Jesus leads to that kind of insight. She was grateful not only for what he had done for her, but for what he was going to do. We'll double back to verse 9 in just a few minutes, but do notice that he says she's done what she could. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. Marked by gratitude. Gratitude serves, gratitude gives, and finally and briefly, gratitude lives. Look at verse 10. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray him to them. He wasn't happy, maybe partly about the money. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. So he sought how he might conveniently betray him. Judas was going to get his one way or another. He was getting paid one way or another. Now, John gives us a little additional insight. I'm actually, in this case, the 3 verses or 4 verses, 9, 10, 11, the 3 verses I'm about to read from John, you will see on the screen. It says, now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. I love that phrase. There's a phrase in John 12, verse 1, where Lazarus is referred to as he who had been dead. You don't hear that about somebody every day. Like, I've never been introduced as, yeah, this is Alan. He used to be dead. Like, never. I don't know how I would react if someone was introduced to me that way. Like, wait, what? But Lazarus was so grateful. Maybe not. I mean, he'd been dead a few days, which means that he'd been in paradise for a few days. Imagine that you're in paradise, like this is the mother of all parties, and then all of a sudden, woo, you're back in your body in the tomb. I mean, you'd be pretty disappointed, I think. I think he might have been upset. He might have stumbled out of that tomb and been like, why? Jesus, why? Your sisters begged me to. Why didn't you ignore them? Like, send me back now, please. I don't know. I imagine he was grateful for this second chance, for this second chance to serve, this second chance to give, this second chance to live. He was so grateful. He wanted to show his gratitude, but how? Well, by living. Gratitude lives. Going back to the 5 love languages, love language number 2 is quality time. And in essence, Jesus gave him more of that. Jesus gave him more quality time with him. Jesus gave him more quality time with his family. And you know, it is interesting that there are no recorded words of Lazarus in the Bible. And in fact, this is the last mention of him chronologically. We don't see him again on the pages of the Bible. But even though his mouth doesn't speak in the sense of it being recorded for us, his life told a story. Have you been given a second chance? I have. What are we doing with our second chance? I love that we serve a God who gives us chance after chance after chance, but what are we doing with those opportunities? Grateful people live. You know Romans 12, verse 1? Let me read it to you from the New Living, or from the Living Bible, not the New Living Bible, but the original Living Bible. And so, dear brothers, I plead with you to give your bodies to God. Let them be a living sacrifice, holy, the kind he can accept. When you think of what he has done for you, is this too much to ask? Yeah. We talked in the introduction about having all the feels, and we said that gratitude isn't just something that we feel, it's something that we do. So we're marked by gratitude. Gratitude serves, gratitude gives, gratitude lives. I said we'd double back, and this will be my last thought before I pray, to what Jesus said about this story being told, like in the years to come. Back in verse 9, he said, wherever this gospel shall be preached, and throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial for her. You know, this is the only time that Jesus spoke of a memorial to anyone. And how unlikely. I mean, think about it. This happened roughly 2,000 years ago in a little tiny village, not Jerusalem, not even, not Rome, but just a little tiny village on the far side of the Mount of Olives. This little incident that happened at a small dinner party. How unlikely that anybody would have been talking about that long at all after it had happened. And yet we're talking about it this morning. It's been fulfilled yet again this weekend. What a legacy. You want to leave a legacy? We do that when we realize that gratitude, it serves. Gratitude, it gives. Gratitude, it lives. And when we do those things, we leave a legacy. And so I love that, and I want to pray about that right now together. Father, thank you for this Bible story. Thank you for the actions that each of these siblings took and for the way that it inspires us to think about what we can do with our gratitude. And Lord, even now as we transition to the communion table, we're so grateful for what you did for us, Father, in sending your son, Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
And now it's time to fill out a Connect card.
Yeah, just go to our website, solachurch.life, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage, letting us know that you watched today, but also you can request information there about our small groups. And there is actually a lot more information on the website about those. At the top, if you click where it says Gather, you'll find information about all of our groups. An in-person group on Tuesday on the west side, an online group on Wednesday, another in-person group on Thursday on the west side. So check it out, find the time, the date, the location that works best for you, and join us for Sola Micro Church.
And don't forget, go and follow Sola Church on social media.
Yep, at Sola Church LA on all your favorite platforms.
And we hope that everyone has a great week. And we will see you next time at Sola Church Online.
Bye, everybody.